It is great to be with you every single week. Mondays live, 3:30 Eastern. This is Hot Sheet. If you're catching us later on, join us live on YouTube. If you're listening to us podcast version, then hello. And also would appreciate if you check out all the prospect profiles we've been running your way. What are those? The top prospect per organization. We go over them, we post them on YouTube, and then eventually we gather them all up and post them podcast-wise, division by division. So make sure you check all of that out. By the way, Scott Braun and Baseball America's J.J. Cooper and Geoff Pontes. Gentlemen, we are going to get right to business today and hit the first move and respond to some radio banter. All right, Tony Maserati is host of the Felger and Maz show on 98.5 The Sports Hub. Obviously, Red Sox fans are pumped about their trio of top prospects. Let's get Tony Maz commenting on one of them.
I was scouring the internet. Is that the right word?
Yep.
To find scouting reports on Roman Anthony. Mm-hmm. And I came across one that said Anthony should become an above average outfielder. What do you mean should? What does should mean? Should tells me that he's not good and that he's got to grow into it. This is the guy who's regarded as the number one prospect in the game. How is a guy the number one prospect in the game if his defense sucks? Because that's how I read that. And after watching him play the outfield, he doesn't exactly read the ball off the bat like Ken Griffey Jr. He doesn't. So here's what I want to know. How come nobody ever tells me about the bad stuff? Why do I have to go looking for it? And why, in God's name, do I have to do my own scouting?
JJ, I'm going to let you reply to that in terms of why Baseball America doesn't talk like your shock jock radio host and say, this guy sucks. This guy's a guaranteed legendary Hall of Famer.
The best way I can put it is we're writing scouting reports, which is projecting into the future. This is not something where we're saying, look, if you want to write, we write about 16 and 17-year-olds who've signed in our professional players. And if you said, if this guy came to the majors today, he would hit 050, does that really give a lot of value? And you could say, well, then you're not telling me about, well, no, we're trying to tell you what this guy projects as in the big leagues over the long term. And in the case, that's not exactly, wasn't reading from our scouting report for Roman Anthony, but if you look at our Roman Anthony scouting reports, the things that stand out about it is he's not a finished product. He is a center fielder now who will probably end up in a corner and is now playing more in the corner. You can see the report right there. He lacks the elite range of a true center fielder. Okay, so I guess we are, in our case, giving you some of the bad with the good, but you the answer to this, the simple answer is, players are not finished products the moment they arrive in the big leagues. And I can't give a better example of this than a Red Sox prospect who's no longer a prospect. Because when Jarren Duran came to the big leagues, he was not a very good outfielder. But Jarren Duran was a former infielder who was converting to the outfield. And now he's a really good defensive outfielder. And if you said, well, so if we wrote at that time, which we didn't, but we kind of did, if we had written that Jarren Duran should become an above average defender in the outfield, that would be an accurate report, even if it might really annoy some radio host in Boston, because the goal is to try to tell you what they're going to get to in the big leagues. And one aspect of that is when players reach the major leagues, they're not finished products yet. And sometimes they're going to develop into what they're going to be.
Yeah, and I think it's funny too. I mean, it's just classic like Boston drive home radio banter where they have to have some anger, particularly Maserati, but that's a totally different story. I think when you look at it, just even on the surface of what he said, should be an above average outfielder, not specifying in a corner, not specifying center field, is like a pretty substantial tool to have when you have the bat that Roman Anthony does. Now, when we look at the player, I think the scouting report nails it. He's probably an average runner, maybe a little bit above average at times now, but just based on the body and kind of how he'll project out, probably moves to an outfield corner. Isn't going to be the most rangy guy, but I think like it's going to at least be average. His routes are really good. He's got great feel for the position, whether it's in center or in a corner, and he's got a plus throwing arm. Like I don't think it's going to be an issue, really, frankly. So it's kind of a funny point of like argument in terms of Anthony's profile to argue about that when he has outlier power and the bat to ball skills and the approach, and does run pretty well, though being a bigger guy and probably more of a power hitting profile. So I think it's just, typical trying to stoke the flames in the fan base and get people angry about a player before he's even here. This isn't, one of those situations like we've been watching with Jason Dominguez where he's utterly lost in the outfield. It's not one of those situations. We didn't see that. And to, go back to Jarren Duran, he's certainly ahead of where Duran's defense was when he was up in Worcester and playing center field and, in the same park. So I think just even the like for like, as long as the speed stays there, I think he's going to have an ability to play all three outfield spots without question.
The other thing I would say with this is that I'm guessing that this is based on the fact that Roman Anthony struggled to catch an Alan Roden ball that was ruled a double. I'm just going to go on a limb because there haven't been that many balls hit to Roman Anthony. We'll note that he's playing more corner. He's playing left field primarily here in spring training, has been more of a center fielder. But he doesn't have any errors yet. But he did kind of botch a ball where he kind of got caught in between and, like, okay, am I diving for it? Am I not? And Alan Roden got a double in that game. And it's like, I do find it kind of humorous. It's kind of almost like a snapshot of that moment right there was enough to be like, this guy's terrible defensively. I've seen it. I know it. That's what he is.
Well, that's why we work within the sport and we don't just watch one play and then judge someone. So anyway, let's step aside because perfect timing. We're actually going to talk about these Red Sox prospects with their senior director of player development, Brian Abraham. He's going to swing by. We'll get him ready in the green room as soon as we come back. Oh, Todd Father, remember the good old days when we would have the cards in the binders, but then they'd get all messed up and we're trying to sell online and it's just real clunky. They really actually weren't the good old days, were they?
No, they were definitely not. But now there's a better way. The Arena Club has been dominant with this. You get to trade your cards, you could sell them. But the best part for me is getting them graded. I love everything about that. This new age of getting cards graded. You could display them on your online showroom, your mobile device. It's the coolest thing in the world.
Whether you're buying, selling, trading, or displaying, Arena Club is the all-in-one trading card platform. You have to sign up for an account at arenaclub.com/foul. Just like Todd Father mentioned, there's a process that combines AI and human grading to get the job done. Right now, 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/foul. Use code FOUL. That's arenaclub.com/foul. Code FOUL for 20% off your first purchase. Here we go. We're back with Brian Abraham. He's the Red Sox Senior Director of Player Development. Brian, great to have you. And how fun has it been so far here in spring training to not only be helping some of these players develop, but to see them get a lot of attention nationally?
Yeah, thanks guys for having me. It's been a lot of fun. Spring training is always is a lot of fun, a lot of optimism always. We made some big acquisitions, a big trade, and obviously a lot of young players that are making an impact in big league camp, which is a ton of fun.
So, Brian, when you have this kind of wave of players coming up, how is that beneficial? Like, is there kind of a symbiotic effect that works there when you've got a Roman Anthony working with a Christian Campbell, working with a Marcelo Meyer, when it was the quad four before Teal was traded as well? Does that kind of boost all of them together in some ways because they're kind of feeding off of each other in some ways?
I think these guys, they train together, they work together, they go home together, they spend time at the field and away from the field together. So I think you're building a culture, hopefully one of winning, hopefully one of hard work, hopefully one of strong development. And these guys really enjoy each other's company. They compete against each other. And to have that day in and day out has been fun to watch. They've all come in different spots in their personal lives, whether it be from high school or college or an acquisition, but having them roll through the system together has been exciting to see, and also make their first big league camps together has been really great to see as well. The positives, the negatives, the different experiences they've been able to talk with each other and work through those experiences to feel each other out and grow together. It's been a lot of fun to watch.
Brian, good to have you on. One of those players that, certainly is within that group is Christian Campbell. He's part of a loaded infield group that you guys have now. Went out, obviously acquired Alex Bregman. Trevor Story's fully healthy. How do you guys see the infield sort of shaking out throughout the season? I know it's obviously been a hot topic of conversation.
I think Brez and our leadership group. The more talent you have, the better. I think these things tend to sort themselves out. It's great to have competition in camp. It's great to have some veterans on this club that have done some really good things in this game, have won championships, have won individual awards, can lead this club. But it's also good to have the young players as well, pushing their way up and challenging other people for spots and opportunities. We're really lucky to have AC and a strong major league staff that will put these guys in the right positions to ultimately put the best 26 men out on the field and on that roster when they break for the season. But I think competition is always a good thing. I think having a lot of good players is a really good thing. Throughout a 162 game season, you need a lot of depth, whether that be in AAA or even AA. It's good to have depth because through injuries, through the ups and downs of the season, there's going to be multiple players that are needed. So I always say it's always good to have strong players that are versatile, players that can impact the roster in different ways. And I think that's what we have.
The thing that stands out to me, Brian, about that is if I look at last year, if you say, okay, well, what went well, what went poorly, you all had a lot of injuries. Everyone does. And when they did, I felt like there were times where it was like y'all were kind of trying to find like, okay, do we have someone who can really step up and fill this role? And you look at it this year, I feel like kind of the reverse of, okay, some may say, well, how are you going to find at bats for everybody? But the flip side is kind of the resilience you get from that, where right now, if you say, okay, pick whoever, if someone goes down with an injury, it's not hard to find a logical plan, a plausible, regular caliber player to kind of step and replace them. How important is that kind of, not just depth, but that like, okay, we have plan B at all these different, these different positions rather than, okay, we're going to be scrambling a little bit.
Yeah, I think, Brez and AC have said multiple times throughout spring and the offseason, the importance of roster building. It's not just those 26 men on the roster that changes throughout the year. It changes throughout spring. Obviously, there's 40 men on the roster for a reason. And then there's obviously always changes throughout the year because of that. Roster moves, different changes that happen, players that have success, players that struggle, and players get different opportunities throughout the year. So to have a group of players that are on the roster, then a group of players that are off the roster that can all make an impact in different ways is incredibly valuable. And I think excites our front office, excites the current roster we have, the current group of players we have in that major league locker room and here in spring training in Fort Myers. And, there's a lot of opportunity ahead. Obviously, it's just spring, but I think given the opportunity to have a chance to compete for a division is exactly what ownership wants, our front office wants, and our players want. And I think that's what we have in front of us.
Wanted to shift gears a little bit here. I don't know if you heard our opening. We were talking a little bit about the conversation in the Boston marketplace regarding Roman Anthony's future position. We feel strongly that, he's going to stick in the outfield and be above average out there just based on the tools. How does the organization sort of project his future position? Where is that center? Is it a corner? Just having some versatility?
I think versatility is really important. Roman's played a lot of center field for us, but I think for all of our outfielders, we try to get them looks in all three spots. You want these guys to be prepared to get an opportunity in the big leagues, and sometimes we're not exactly sure where that will be. So giving them the chance to play in left, for Roman, a chance to play in left, a chance to play in right, a chance to play in center is really important. We see him as a defender that has good reads, good jumps, good range, and makes a really big impact on the defensive side. I think I heard right before I hopped on that there's still continued development even when our players are at the big league level. And I think that's really important to remember. And these guys are constantly improving, constantly developing, constantly learning. And that doesn't just happen in the minor leagues. It happens in the big leagues with our major league staff, with experience, with the challenges that come with better competition. So For Roman specifically, we're really excited where he is defensively. We certainly aren't going to look at just, one or two plays in spring training and decide this is who he's going to be. It's obviously a bigger picture, and there's a lot more that goes into it to decide and for us to evaluate how good of a player he's going to be. And some of that comes with work, some of that comes with the opportunity that he has in front of him. But can't say enough about what a good player he is and has the opportunity to be. But obviously that comes again with a lot of work, more experience, more challenges, and we feel like he's going to be a strong defender in the outfield no matter what position he plays.
When you mentioned player development, one of the things I want to ask, kind of big picture, in your decade doing this, and you've kind of had your hands in scouting and player development. It feels like that we're in kind of the player development era in a lot of ways now, where teams see opportunities. I'll take Christian Campbell for an example, where Christian Campbell at Georgia Tech was a really good player, but was a contact hitter without a whole lot of power. I feel like, that nowadays that's viewed as an opportunity. Nowadays that's viewed as through the lens of, okay, that means he's going to fit perfectly in what we want to improve for him. On the pitching side, we have all these stories, not just for you guys, but all around baseball now, of the pitcher who never had success at the college level, but still gets drafted on day 2 in the 7th round and goes out and shoves immediately. How has it kind of changed? Like, am I right to kind of thinking that this is kind of the era of player development, major and minor league side, where it's like there are opportunities viewed there that you didn't used to be there?
Yeah, for sure. I think development has evolved a lot over the years. We utilize data and technology a lot more than we used to. We're very data driven within our organization. I think it's really organizationally, and this is not just us, this is every organization, really understanding what we value, what creates sustainable success at the major league level, and then kind of working backwards to help train our players to get to those different areas. Every player is different. Every player has strengths. Every player has weaknesses, but giving them the opportunity to improve in particular areas that will lead to success, not only where they currently are, but at the upper levels and eventually the big leagues, is really, really valuable. So, when we draft a player, when we acquire a player, they might be lacking in a specific space, but it could be an area that we feel like we can help develop, help improve upon. And I think those are the players we're looking to acquire. Whatever that particular void is in that particular player, if we can help improve on it within our programming, within our development space, we're going to try to be aggressive and acquire that player. So I think it's a really exciting time. Again, I think with the data we have, the information we have, the coaching we have, the willingness to challenge what we have done for years, what we may or may not have known, and do things a little bit differently than maybe we have in the past makes this time in development really exciting, a chance for us to challenge ourselves and always look for ways to improve.
Well, I want to follow up on that. Obviously, Christian Campbell was a huge breakout for you guys last year, but I think there were others like throughout the organization. Obviously, he unfortunately got hurt, but like Louis Perales looked like he took a major step forward. Justinson Garcia was one that certainly took a big step forward as well. Who were the early standouts in camp? I know this time of year is when we started to hear a little bit last year about Christian Campbell, how this guy needed to be in the top 30. He was going to be a top 100 prospect, ended up being a top 10 prospect by the time that the year was over. I don't know if we have a breakout like that this year, but anybody from this draft class that you feel really good about going into 2025?
I'm going to be biased. I think a lot of our players have made some significant strides this offseason, whether it be adding weight, whether it be improving bat speed or adding some velo. A couple guys that stick out, Mikey Romero, who was a top pick for us a couple years ago, has put on some really good weight, has impacted baseball in the short amount of time here really well. I think a Connolly Early, again, another recent draft pick who's added some velo and reached AA last year, is really intriguing young arm. Nelly Taylor is another one, a little bit of a later pick for us. I think he kind of fits in that Christian Campbell mold in the sense that he has some tools, he has some attributes. We felt like getting him into our programming and improving his athleticism, improving his bat speed, improving some of his bat to ball qualities, we'd really see him take off. And obviously there's still games to be played and a whole year ahead of us. But just from the information that we're gathering, some of the information that we can look at within the batting cages or within the field currently, we've seen some significant strides. So those are a few that kind of that come to mind. Again, I think we've seen a lot of guys get stronger, which is incredibly important for our group. And Obviously, the programming that we have on both the offensive side and the pitching side has been consistent over the past few years, and we've seen some significant gains with a lot of our players, and looking forward to success this year and for years to come.
Christian Campbell's been getting some starts in the outfield in addition, like something he did last year as well. But where do you, I mean, it kind of feel like he could play almost anywhere, but where does he fit? Where does he play best right now? And is there almost anywhere that y'all played him, like where it's like, okay, he's going to need some more work there? Like if you had to put him out there at center field or you had to put them out there at shortstop, even though he did that someone last year with Meyer hurt, are those positions where it's like, okay, he's probably not big league caliber yet there, at least because he hasn't had a whole lot of time out there?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say exactly what is his best position, but I do think the versatility is incredibly unique where you can kind of put him in a different spot and he plays that spot really well. You mentioned him playing shortstop last year when Marcelo got hurt, and he played an above average shortstop for a good chunk of time. But he's played second, he's played the corner outfields, he's played a little bit of center field. The athleticism, the versatility is, to me, an incredibly unique quality for someone who can impact the baseball on the offensive side so consistently. So for us, I think it's, allow that to be a strength versus a weakness. He's able to play, different spots. Like anything, the more work he gets at individual spaces, he's going to improve. He's obviously gotten a lot of work at second base this spring. He's played left field the last couple times during the big league game. So the versatility to me is a really unique quality for a guy who can impact the offensive side as much as he potentially can. So I think we want to make sure we can lean on that. And if there is one spot that he has to play, whether that be second base or an outfield spot or maybe somewhere else, we'll continue to focus and shift our work into that space a little bit more directly. But again, I think the versatility to me is an incredibly strong quality, and his ability to make adjustments, his ability to easily adjust to those spots is, again, a strong attribute that he has shown and is able to pick up and roll with things pretty quickly.
Brian, can you take us through your emotions when there's a trade and your organization acquires a player that can help the team, especially when it's a big leaguer? We'll point to the obvious example from this past offseason. Garrett Crochet profiles as a number one starter. Awesome addition for the big league club. You also know all of the players involved in the trade. I'll put the headliner at the top in Kyle Teal just because that's the name. He'd been in the org obviously for a little bit already and was talked about very highly. So how bittersweet is that situation for you? And what's the aftermath? Are you watching him and following him still just to keep an eye on how he does and if he establishes himself as a good big leaguer?
To answer the last part first, I think, yeah, of course, when you get to know players and be a part of their careers in any type of capacity, you hope they have a ton of success. One of the best things about player development is the personal relationships, the intimate conversations you're able to have with a lot of these guys, getting to know them on and off the field, potentially their families as well. So certainly want to root for players that you get to know. I would say our goal is to put out a team year in and year out that can compete for a World Series. So anytime you can add to that 26-man roster to help make an impact for that potential World Series, it's going to be a win. To acquire a top end, top rotation in the arm like Garrett, I think is incredibly exciting. But with that comes obviously having to make tough decisions, having to give up some really good players like we did. And the hope is from our end, we're developing a lot of players. We're allowing guys to continue to improve and get better, that we can give up a few players in a trade like that to help the big league club. And maybe that gives an opportunity for some players that are behind those four that we traded to eventually develop and to be more impactful players for us in the minor leagues and eventually the big leagues as well. So certainly bittersweet, but at the end of the day, we're here to win championships in Boston. We're here to win in Boston, win a division, win a World Series, and anything that our player development group or our players can do to help impact that, the better. It's definitely difficult on the personal level. But at the end of the day, we're here to win for the big league club. And I think we work towards that with that trade.
So I would have to imagine in some ways there's a little bit of almost Christmas morning after a draft when you bring these players in and you kind of start to get to know them and all. But with this group, what were a couple of those first inklings that, hey, this could be pretty special? You all are our number one ranked farm system, even after that trade. You've got we mentioned Campbell and Anthony and Marcelo Meyer, and there's, again, we mentioned some of the other names as well. But when was the point where it was like you saw that little glimpse of Roman Anthony, you saw that glimpse from Campbell, or where you're like, hey, this could be different from just your average run of the mill classes that are coming through here?
I it's hard to say exactly when, but I would say the relationship between our development group and our acquisition group is really strong. So, when we're in the draft room, when we're seeing videos of some of these guys, and there's a potential to, draft a particular player like a Roman Anthony, or a Kyle Teal or a Marcelo Meyer, there's a ton of excitement. So I think those are the initial signs when you potentially could get a really impactful player such as those players. And then, the time you get to meet them, the time you get to spend some quality time with them to see what types of people they are, their willingness to challenge themselves, the willingness to want to improve day in and day out. That to me says a lot about who they are and who they potentially can be. Their willingness to fail, their willingness to not be comfortable with status quo, to want to be not just good but great, and do it in a market such as Boston when they know the pressure is high, when they know the expectation is a World Series. The group that you mentioned, Christian included, Marcelo, Roman, I think they displayed that from the moment they put on a Red Sox uniform, not only from what they said but also by their actions as well. So I think they embody a lot of what this organization represents, a lot of what our player development group represents, the evolution and the willingness to challenge the norms and do things a little bit different, but ultimately understand that we're trying to optimize their abilities and optimize them as young baseball players. And there's going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be struggles. But as long as we're all working toward the goals that we have laid out for them, the goals that they have laid out for themselves, that they're going to hopefully be successful in the long run in Boston. So it's done. I don't think it happens all at once. It happens over time. But I think when they get to big league camp and you see them in a big league uniform and they're starting a game here at JetBlue, I think it puts things into perspective about how close they potentially are and the impact that they could have in the very near future for our big league club.
Brian, this has been great. Really appreciate the insight, and also keep up the great work with the player development program you've got going over there with the organization. Thanks, and good to see you again.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. Really appreciate it, and take care.
You too. Have a great rest of the spring training. Brian Abraham with us, running player development with the Red Sox. That was great. So obviously, if you missed anything, that was really good. You can obviously go back in time here if you're with us on YouTube right now. And if you have any suggestions in the future, prospects or player development systems and people within those that you want to hear from, then certainly let us know. In the meantime, between this show and next week's show, here's some homework. Check out some of the top prospect videos that we put together. They're called Prospect Profiles. They're all over the YouTube channel, and they're bunched up together by division via podcast. You can go to the Baseball America podcast page. If you are with us on YouTube and you want to get all of those together, go for it. And otherwise, we will see you next week for another Hot Sheet.